All right, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of the Lock Up Shutdown podcast. My name is Monica. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Zach. How's it going tonight?
Going well. Just wrapped up week 2 of the NFL season. Gone by pretty quickly, and I'm looking forward to the next 16 weeks of this constant entertainment that the NFL season has been so far.
I'm glad to hear it. Today, we're going over this year's top rookie wide receivers from the 2021 draft class, whether or not the Raiders are the shadowy dark horse of the league, and which star-studded running back will win this year's rushing title between King Henry and a healthy Christian McCaffrey. But first, let's talk about the atrocious performance from this year's second overall pick, Zach Wilson, who threw no touchdowns and 4 interceptions in the Jets' bout against the Patriots. How are we feeling about Zach Wilson, Zach?
I'm not worried about Zach Wilson at all. Sure, he obviously had a bad game against the Patriots, but any game against Bill Belichick as a rookie in your second career game is going to be a struggle for you. So I think that Zach Wilson is the best Jets quarterback since Joe Namath. And as bad as Sam Darnold was with the Jets, you look at what he's done with the Panthers so far. He's been phenomenal for the Panthers. So I'm not worried about Zach Wilson just yet. I think it's more of a Jets issue than a Zach Wilson issue. So I'm not worried about him at all, and I think he'll turn it around in time and be just fine in the end of his career.
Absolutely, and if I'm going to be honest, I think Zach Wilson should be worried about the Jets as opposed to the Jets being worried about Zach Wilson. I mean, Zach Wilson, he's played okay through the first 2 weeks. He was 54% in week 1, 57% in week 2. He's thrown over 460 yards so far this season. He's been sacked 10 times, though, and even though he threw 4 interceptions in his bout in week 2 against the Patriots, he's playing against a Patriots defense which is as strong as ever. I mean, last season, obviously, they looked weak, but they had half of their defense opted out for the pandemic season. This year, they've got Dante Hightower back. They reacquired Kyle Van Noy from the Dolphins. I mean, the Patriots are looking as great of a defense as they always have been.
Yep, there's the debate about Belichick or Brady constantly going around now, but one thing to say about Bill Belichick is that he always has a strong defense. So for Zach Wilson to go up against that defense in his second career game, I don't think there were too many people that could have expected him and his surrounding offensive members to create many problems for the Patriots defense, and that turned out to be exactly what happened in that Jets-Patriots game.
Well, if there's one offensive weapon who is creating problems for defenses this season, it's looking to be Teddy Bridgewater, who is seeming to have a complete revival of his career. Is Teddy Bridgewater looking to be the same quarterback that he was as a Minnesota Viking?
I think he's a fully capable NFL starter and would start on most teams in the league, but I'm not going to say he's an elite quarterback yet. He still never won a playoff game and has only led the Vikings to one playoff appearance, which I think he was carried by Adrian Peterson to get to the playoffs.
I mean, he still only lost because of Blair
most
Walsh.
teams to the playoffs.
Honestly,
Blair Walsh deserves almost all of the blame, but that doesn't mean that Teddy Bridgewater is a playoff caliber quarterback.
I mean, I think Teddy Bridgewater is an absolutely great quarterback. Sure, he couldn't do anything with the Panthers last year, but I don't think anyone was going to do anything with the Panthers last year, whether you had Tom Brady on the team or Teddy Bridgewater. So far this season, he's been throwing 77%. He has almost 600 total yards, has 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and he's 2-0. The only worry is that he's only played against the Giants and the Jaguars, who aren't exactly known for their defensive prowess, but if anything, we saw the Giants can be pretty good in their Thursday night bout against the Washington football team. The Jaguars, not so much, but that has yet to be seen.
the good news for Teddy Bridgewater is that he has a lot more weapons than other quarterbacks have around the league, especially when Jerry Jeudy gets back healthy again. But saying all that, I would still predict the Denver Broncos to finish in last place in their division behind the
I
Chiefs, Raiders, and Chargers.
Yeah, I probably won't argue against that. The Broncos are certainly in last place in their division, but I think they've found a quarterback that can lead them going forward, at least for a few more years.
For sure. And I think he would start on over half the teams in the NFL right now, but in the situation he's in Denver right now, he's not gonna make them anything but a 6-10 team potentially.
Another team that probably could use Teddy Bridgewater's performance is the Atlanta Falcons, who are seeing a lot of struggles, obviously, with their veteran quarterback Matt Ryan. Are the Falcons right to keep their faith in former Pro Bowler Matt Ryan?
The Falcons right now could have any quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes, and I think they would still have a losing record. They're giving up 40 points a game right now and can't seem to get anything right on defense. Sure, Matt Ryan hasn't played like we expect him to play, but losing Julio Jones, that was probably to be expected. So losing your best receiver you've ever had, plus a defense that's giving up 40 points a game, I don't think there's much Matt Ryan could do that would keep the Falcons competitive in these games right now.
Their defense is certainly a weak point for them. Matt Ryan in week 1 was 60% for 164 yards, didn't record any other stats otherwise in their loss to the Eagles. Threw for 76% and 300 yards in their loss to the Bucks. Unfortunately, was 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And 2 of those interceptions came on consecutive offensive plays for Matt Ryan late in the game when they frankly needed him to not intercept the ball the most. I don't know if Matty Ice truly has the same ice in his veins anymore. Not to say that he really ever did, looking at the 28-3 score, but I can't exactly blame him too much for that. I don't know. I don't think Matt Ryan is the future for the Falcons anymore. I think it's about time that the Falcons need to start realizing they need to move on, but I also don't think that they're in too much of a rush to move on, if that makes any sense.
Yep, the Falcons certainly aren't in panic mode right now and shouldn't be in panic mode, but I think they also realize that 36-year-old Matt Ryan isn't going to lead them to where they want to go anymore in his career. And I think with the team they have this year, they'll earn a high enough draft pick that they might be able to get a quarterback like a Spencer Rattler or someone else in the draft right now. So I think they'll be able to stick it out for this season. And if they find a quarterback that they like in this year's draft, they may well go ahead and take that quarterback and start the transition from Matt Ryan to their next quarterback and on to bigger and better things, hopefully, for the Falcons.
Well, I can say one thing for certain, and that's that if the Falcons get a high draft pick in this year's draft, they certainly won't be picking a kicker. However, a kicker can be an important part of any team, and ultimately, the fate of any close game basically will come down to the kicker position. Is a clutch kicker the most important edge for a team to have?
It certainly seems like it due to the role that they play at the end of the game, but I'm taking any skill player over a kicker every day of the week. I'd say your wide receiver 3 is more important than whether you have the 10th best kicker in the league or the 20th best kicker in the league. So Sure, their role probably gets magnified due to the fact that they're kicking at the end of the game to win or lose, but I think a wide receiver has more of a role to play than a kicker is going to for almost any team in the league right now.
Now, a lot of the games from week 2 did come down to last second or overtime kicks. We had the Vikings game where they unfortunately missed a kick at the last second. In the same game, the Cardinals kicker, Matt Prater, hit yet another bomb, 62-yarder. Obviously, one of the greatest kickers to ever do it. So, no doubt that he was going to hit that. Cowboys kicker Greg Zuerlein hit a 55-yarder to win over the Chargers at the last moment.
That was an impressive kick from Zuerlein, especially after Mike McCarthy's botching of time management to put him in that situation. But Zuerlein bailed him out, and props to him for doing that.
The Washington football team on Thursday won with a last-second field goal, and the Titans won in overtime with, you guessed it, a field goal. I did a bit of research. Good. So, an elite-level kicker can create an extra 20 points a season compared to a replacement-level kicker. However, when you compare that to the fact that the modern offense scores on average about 380 points every season, it's really not too much of an impact. 75% of field goals in the last 3 minutes of a half are converted. Obviously, there's the whole icing the kicker situation, but that's for another day. I don't know. Kickers are a very important position in the NFL, and I think it's great to have a clutch kicker like a Justin Tucker or a Harrison Butker. Greg the Leg, obviously, is one of the greatest to ever do it. Matt Prater. It's great to have really strong, clutch, ice in their veins kickers, but I just don't. I can only agree with you that it's not a necessity for a team to win. Obviously, a lot of the greatest teams have great kickers, but I don't know. I'm not exactly a kicker fan, you know?
Yeah, I'm not jumping on the kicker bandwagon. You players
Sorry,
that are
Pat.
out there 4 or 5 times a game, they have an important role, but that role just seems to get blown out of proportion sometimes due to the fact that they just happen to be at the end of the game. If they're kicking a 56-yard field goal with 5 minutes left in the first quarter, no one's gonna care if they miss or make it. But as soon as you put it 5 seconds left in the fourth quarter, that's all you're gonna talk about the next day is whether they made that kick or missed the kick. So they've got pressure on their shoulders, but I'm not trying to get the best kicker in the league if I'm the GM of a franchise right now.
Absolutely agree. Speaking of GMs, whoever the GM rebuilding the Browns has done an absolutely incredible job. The Browns are looking great this season. They looked great last season. They looked great the year before. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs in 2019. I do believe they made them and won a game last year. They just keep getting better and better each year. Is this the year, however, that the Browns take the crown of the AFC North?
The Browns do look like the AFC North favorites right now after 2 games. I'm waiting to see when Odell Beckham gets back for the Browns, what he causes. I know there's been rumors going around about how the Browns have a better record without Odell Beckham playing since he's been there than the record they have with him playing. But obviously, whether OBJ is back to 100% or only 75% of his old self, I think with the Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Jarvis Landry attack that they have, along with the impressive defense with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney, the Browns are going to cause problems for every team that they face, and they're one mishandled punt away from being 2-0 and beating the Chiefs in Week 1. So Browns are favorites in my book.
I mean, obviously the competition is a little bit weak. The Bengals we don't talk about. The Ravens and Steelers are injured. I wrote this question before watching the Ravens beat the Chiefs, so maybe I was being a little bit pessimistic. However, I still am firm in my belief that the Browns are going to win the AFC North this year. I mean, they had amazing performance in their loss to the Chiefs, even though they lost, it was mostly just that one mishandled punt that made the biggest difference. Statistically speaking, they completely blew out the Texans in week 2, but, yeah, it's the Texans. It's not saying too much. Baker Mayfield so far this season is looking absolutely incredible. He's thrown 40 for 49. In his game against the Texans, he completed 90% of his passes. He's thrown for 534 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. It's not the greatest stat line in the world, but he's completing just about every pass. He's looking like an incredible quarterback, and that's why he was taken number 1 overall in his draft class. Nick Chubb so far is looking great. He's 26 carries for 178 yards, 3 touchdowns and a fumble. I don't think there's a doubt in my mind that the Browns are going to win the AFC North this year. And that's coming from a huge diehard Ravens fan. We are not winning the AFC North.
Yeah, the Cleveland Browns may not be flashy, but they've just got so many weapons on offense right now that they can give it to whoever and they'll get the job done, whether it's Nick Chubb one play and then pass the ball to Jarvis Landry and run the ball Kareem Hunt on 3rd down. So multi-headed monster with the Cleveland Browns, and that monster is going to climb all the way up to first place in the AFC North and lead them to yet another playoff appearance, which seems crazy with where they were a few years ago, but come to be for the Cleveland Browns, and they're looking mighty impressive the first 2 weeks of the season so far.
Well, speaking of weapons, a lot of teams this year acquired new weapons for themselves in this year's draft, and a lot of those weapons are wide receivers. It's time for our rookie spotlight, where we go over the top players at any position as they were taken in the draft. This week, we're talking about the first round wide receivers, including Ja'Marr Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Kadarius Toney, and Rashod Bateman. Zach, let's start off with Ja'Marr Chase. How well do you think Ja'Marr Chase is going to do this season? How do you see his career playing out?
After preseason, I was worried about Ja'Marr Chase, but he's calmed all those fears that I had about him, and he's lighted the NFL world on fire so far with this Bengals offense, with 2 touchdowns and 2 games so far, and getting 155 total yards. He's looked good, and in between the preseason and week 1, he learned how to catch in NFL football, which is proven effective for the Bengals so far.
He's looked great so far this season. Obviously, last year he sat out in college to prepare for the NFL. It didn't look like that was paying off when it was preseason, but so far through 2 weeks of season, Ja'Marr Chase has looked as great as we've expected him to. He's taken 5th to the Bengals from LSU. Obviously, he has that connection with Joe Burrow. I think they're going to be a tandem for years and years to come, as long as Joe Burrow stays with the Bengals.
Yep, it's been good to see the Bengals receiving core this season. So obviously have many other issues with their defense and offensive line, but their receiving core and quarterback are going to be special if they can get some key pieces around them. So Bengals have young core, Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Ja'Marr Chase has passed all tests thrown at him so far in the first 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Another tandem created through this year's draft was Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa, both obviously hailing from Alabama. Jalen Waddle was taken with the 6th pick to the Miami Dolphins. So far this season, has 10 catches on 13 targets, 109 yards, and a touchdown. He unfortunately had a fumble lost in week 2. What do you think about Jalen Waddle going into the future?
I'm not as excited about Jalen Waddle so far. He's looked okay for the Dolphins. Certainly a starting receiver, but doesn't seem to be paying off as high of a draft pick as the Dolphins would have hoped when they signed him. He hasn't reconnected that college connection that he had with Tua at Alabama. So I'm not writing him off just yet, but I think the Dolphins would have expected a little bit more in the first couple weeks after seeing what his previously did with Tua Tagovailoa.
I mean, I certainly think that the Dolphins could have waited a little bit to pick up Jalen Waddle and gotten a position player like Sewell. You know, getting someone to protect Tua, who unfortunately suffered an injury in week 2. I don't know. Jalen Waddle looks to be a pretty good wide receiver so far. Again, he has over 100 yards so far this season. In 2020, he suffered a broken ankle, so he's probably still recovering a little bit from that. But I think if he's at 100% health, he's going to be a great wide receiver, and is going to be a weapon for the Dolphins' offense for as long as he's there.
Yeah, he's a weapon for sure, but I think the next guy, Devontae Smith, has looked better than Jalen Waddle has, with Devontae Smith in Philadelphia and Jalen Hurts combining with him. They look like a deadly duo in week 1, tearing up that Falcons defense, which, like I said, doesn't mean much, but I'm still high on Devontae Smith and think he could be the number 1 wide receiver in Philadelphia for years to come after the first 2 games of watching him.
I think that Devontae Smith is a pretty strong wide receiver, but obviously not I wouldn't say he's going to be the greatest out of this group that we're talking about today. I mean, so far he's 8 catches on 15 targets, 87 yards and a touchdown, no fumbles unlike his former Alabama teammate. I don't know. He looked great in week 1, but again, that was against the Falcons defense, which isn't much at all. You know, Devonta Smith, he's a very good wide receiver. Obviously, he was a Heisman winner at Alabama, but he's kind of overrated if you ask me. I think he's an average wide receiver at best.
Yeah, he did have maybe the best college season that I've ever seen last year with Alabama, and I think he's adjusted a lot better to the NFL than I guess you think of him, but a heck of a wide receiver, and I think he'll continue that path of leading the Philadelphia Eagles, and hopefully the Eagles will be back on top, and I'm envisioning him being the next Deshaun Jackson of the Philadelphia Eagles.
It's a very bold claim.
Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith will be the next Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson. I'm calling that right now. Heard it here first on the Lockup Shutdown podcast.
Well, one wide receiver we know for certain probably won't be a Deshaun Jackson type anytime soon, especially in the current situation he's in with his current team, is Kadarius Toney, who was taken with the 20th pick to the Giants from the University of Florida. He's been hardly targeted at all in the first 2 weeks and has just 2 catches for -2 yards, obviously sparking the memes that we all have more yards so far this season than Kadarius Toney.
Yep, not the start Kadarius Toney would have been hoping for in his NFL career, but I think with the talent and speed he showed at Florida, I'm not writing him off just yet, but he's certainly probably at the bottom of the list. I know Rashod Bateman hasn't played in a game yet either, that we'll talk about him later, but Kadarius Toney hasn't lived up to that 20th pick yet and hasn't even been close to it yet, and I'd put him at the bottom of our list so far in our career projections.
I mean, personally, I like Kadarius Toney as wide receiver. I thought he was really great at Florida, and I was pleased to see him drafted in the first round. However, the Giants seem to have absolutely no interest in using him. Again, he's been hardly targeted at all in the first 2 weeks, and his 2 catches have been negative yardage. I mean, he's got Daniel Jones throwing to him, for crying out loud, but at the very least, you could devise some game plan to get Daniel Jones to throw the ball to your first round wide receiver. I mean, goodness gracious, the coaches seem to have no interest in using him.
There seems to be some issues going on in the Giants locker room right now, as we saw Kenny Golladay explode, and what looked like he was exploding at Daniel Jones in frustration, but turned out to be Jason Garrett, the offensive coordinator for the Giants. So I'm sure Kadarius Toney is probably feeling the same way. Kenny Golladay is feeling unhappy with the targets, and if you can't get targets from Daniel Jones, against Washington, I don't know who you're going to get targets from, because Daniel Jones seems to have his career best game against Washington every time. So
Kenny Golladay should have signed with the Ravens.
Not enough targets for Golladay, and no targets for Kadarius Toney. So we'll see what the Giants do moving forward, as they play the Falcons this week coming up in week 3. So we'll see if either of those receivers can turn it around on Sunday against the porous Falcons defense.
Well, I was saying that Kenny Golladay should sign with the Ravens, but as we all know, this offseason he chose not to, and instead the Ravens were forced to draft a wide receiver in the first round, and we got just what we were looking for, a big frame guy named Rashod Bateman out of Minnesota. He's injured so far this season, so we haven't had the chance to see him so far, but he'll be back around week 5 or 6. I cannot wait to see the Ravens offense with a massive wide receiver like Rashod Bateman for Lamar to throw to.
Rashod Bateman's looked unbelievable in training camp so far. If you are able to make Marlon Humphrey look as silly as Rashod Bateman did, then he'll be able to use that speed and skills on almost any cornerback in the league, and that's what the Ravens need right now. So I've got high expectations for Rashod Bateman after the training camp and preseason highlights that we've seen from him.
The Lamar Jackson-Rashod Bateman connection is going to be something spoken about for years, in my opinion. I was so excited to get Rashod Bateman when we drafted him in the draft this year. I was sitting there just crossing my fingers like, please draft Rashod Bateman. This guy is an incredible wide receiver. Obviously, he was great at Minnesota, sat out in 2020. But, how can you not think that with Lamar Jackson now having a target to throw to, I mean, this is going to be the greatest offense ever seen once Rashod Bateman flourishes into a starting wide receiver.
We'll see if the Ravens have a running back healthy at that point when he comes back. But
always have Lamar.
All jokes aside, I think the Ravens are going to be a tough offense to stop with Hollywood Brown, Tyson Williams, Latavius Murray, maybe Le'Veon Bell at that point. So they've got plenty of star power in that Ravens offense to
top tight end in the league, Mark Andrews.
Create an opportunity for Rashod Bateman to carve out chances against defenses.
Well, I think that's enough about this year's rookies, but let's start talking about last year's rookies. I want to start off with Tua Tagovailoa. Do we think that Tua Tagovailoa is NFL ready?
I think Tua's NFL ready, and if you give him some time to get used to the receivers that the Dolphins have right now, he'll be able to lead the Dolphins to contending with the Bills for the AFC East Championship. With Will Fuller hopefully coming back in week 3, along with the weapons of Jalen Waddle and the returning receivers with Myles Gaskin in the backfield, the Dolphins have a chance to be good, but it seems to be too many changing pieces for Tua so far. He had those 10 games last season, the 2 games this season, but it seems like one thing after another is happening for Tua and hasn't been able to get a consistent team around him yet that's able to stick together. So he showed it in college, and he's rebounded from his injury a lot better than many people expected, and I think he'll be just fine for many years to come in the NFL.
I mean, yeah, I'm not too worried about Tua not being NFL ready, but I think that the team around him is completely collapsing. Like you said, he played 10 games last year, 2 games this year, and has been sacked on average 2 times a game. He was sacked 20 times in his 10-game stint last year, and he's already been sacked 4 times so far this year. He went out in week 2 with a bruised rib, which is unfortunate that he got sacked 2 times in the few minutes that he actually played in the game in week 2.
Yeah, the Dolphins, whether he's NFL ready or not, the Dolphins obviously need him. After Tua went out in their game on Sunday, the Dolphins couldn't get anything going, and it led to the odd 0 points scored by the Miami Dolphins against the Buffalo Bills defense.
Absolutely. Next up, let's talk about another of last year's rookie quarterbacks who is constantly being compared to Tua and will probably be constantly compared to Tua. Joe Burrow is not looking great so far this season. He didn't look great last season, but obviously that's at fault of the people protecting. Is Joe Burrow's future in jeopardy behind an atrocious Bengals offensive line?
I think he'll be fine behind the Bengals O-line. The current Bengals O-line, he wouldn't be fine behind, but I think the Bengals have enough pieces now that it might be somewhat appealing for a free agent to maybe sign with the Bengals. Previously, they didn't have anybody anywhere, and no one would be like, oh, I want to go to that team. But with the pieces they have now, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and a young quarterback, Joe Burrow, is capable of tearing apart any defense if he's given the chance. I think they could sign a couple linemen and give Joe Burrow the chance to prove why he won the Heisman and had one of the best seasons ever as a college quarterback at LSU.
I'm a little bit worried about Joe Burrow personally. I think that by the time Joe Burrow's rookie contract is up, he's going to want to skedaddle out of that franchise. He was sacked 32 times in his 10 games of 2020, and is 12 more than Tua. He was sacked 5 times in week 1 by the Vikings, sacked 4 times in week 2 by the Bears. Just this offseason, during the draft, the Bengals completely passed up on the pick everyone thought they were going to choose, which was Penei Sewell, in order to draft Jamar Chase, and they didn't pick up any offensive linemen until 2 offensive tackles who were drafted in rounds 2 and 4. The Bengals, they're just going to completely leave this guy in complete jeopardy.
So are you saying that it's a Bengals problem and not a Joe Burrow problem then?
I think it's definitely a Bengals problem, and I think that Joe Burrow is going to become frustrated if he continues to be just constantly pounded back there.
Yeah, he's taken a pounding for sure, but I'm hoping with the receivers he has now, he can maybe get the ball out just that little bit quicker, and maybe an improved offensive line be able to get the Bengals going in the right direction. But in that tough division they've got where every team seems to have a top 5 defense in the league,
Absolutely.
The Bengals are going to struggle to score a lot of points in the current form that they're in right now.
We've talked about Tua, we've talked about Joe Burrow, but another big headliner for the quarterbacks taken in last year's draft was Justin Herbert. Do we think that Justin Herbert is bound to be the best of his draft class?
I don't think Justin Herbert is going to be near the best in his draft class. He's got more weapons than either quarterback and hasn't looked, I won't say anywhere near the best quarterback, but he hasn't looked anywhere near what I think he's capable of looking like with the weapons he has around him, with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and they've got Austin Eckler in the backfield as well as fully capable of receiving the ball. So with only 2 touchdowns so far for Herbert, I'm not too sold on him. We all saw what he did last year and led the Chargers to a few wins, but career projection wise, I don't think Justin Herbert will ever be a top 5 quarterback in the league.
If you put Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa in that Chargers system, I think that either of them would throw for 10,000 yards in a season. Just like genuinely, any other quarterback would succeed just as much, if not more, in that system that the Chargers have going. I mean, he's thrown 70%. He's thrown nearly 70% in his career so far, and through 17 starts, he has 5,000 yards and has 33 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. But he's also 7-10, so it's clear that he can't lead his team to victory quite as much as he should be able to. But last season they were very banged up, and that probably has something to do with it. But the Chargers just, I don't know. Justin Herbert's a little bit.
The multiple turnovers in both games this season doesn't,
by all means,
impress me.
He's going to look great for his first couple of seasons, but I think that we're gonna start hearing the overrated talks very, very soon.
Yeah, if you remember, he wasn't supposed to start for the Chargers when he first came in, but with a mishap by the Chargers trainer and injuring Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert got thrown into the mix and started off well, which is why he kept the job. But I think that newness factor wore off pretty quickly, and the Chargers fans are starting to realize that Justin Herbert may not be their saving grace that they thought he was after leading them to a close game against the Chiefs in his first career start.
It's just beginner's luck after all. Now, Justin Herbert's in-division rival, the Raiders, on the other hand, are looking incredible this season. Starting off 2-0 against both AFC North opponents in the Ravens and Steelers. Are the Raiders the real deal?
I think the Raiders are legit. They've played 2 of maybe the best defenses in the league so far and have gained over 900 yards in those 2 games. So if you're gaining 450 yards a game against 2 of the best defenses, they've clearly got something going on right in that system, and John Gruden seems to have figured it out. And if you beat the Steelers without Josh Jacobs, that's got to give you props for that. So the Raiders are back, and I think they'd struggle to win the division, obviously due to their Chiefs being in there, but I think the Las Vegas Raiders are a playoff team this year.
I completely agree with that. Derek Carr is looking as great as he ever has. I mean, in week 1, he was 34 for 56, through 435 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Week 2, he was 28 for 37, 75%, mind you, with 382 yards and 2 touchdowns against some of the greatest defenses in the league. But you do have to consider that both teams he's faced up against are heavily injured, especially on the defensive end, and ultimately are not quite the teams that they should be. But I mean, the Raiders look incredible. They have that triple threat they have a triple threat able to receive the ball in Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Henry Ruggs. Obviously, Derek Carr has Josh Jacobs behind him, one of the best running backs in the league right now.
Yeah,
the Raiders should make the playoffs in a wild card position this year. And Derek
Yeah.
Carr is looking as great as he ever has.
Oh yeah, there's been instances in Derek Carr's career where I've not been impressed with him whatsoever, but got to give him credit. He's rebounded really well this season, seems to have figured everything out, and it's exactly why he's thrown for almost 800 yards in the first 2 games. So the Raiders are back, and the Raiders are dangerous, and I'm expecting a Raiders playoff game come wildcard weekend against potentially the Bills or the Browns.
All right, moving on to our last subject of today, the big headliner. Do we think coming into this season with a healthy, returning Christian McCaffrey, do we think that Derrick Henry is going to edge him out for another consecutive rushing title? Or do we believe that Christian McCaffrey is going to steal his place as the king once again?
Derrick Henry is one of the best running backs to ever play the game of football, and he's going to beat Christian McCaffrey out. He only had one good half so far this season, but if you look at that half and see how dominant he was against the Seahawks in the second half yesterday, you'll see why every defense should be scared. He combined for 35 carries, 182 yards, and 3 touchdowns yesterday. I think all 3 of those touchdowns came in the all-purpose yards. Yep, so he's not the receiving threat that Christian McCaffrey is, but he's a 5 times better runner than Christian McCaffrey is with the speed, size, strength, anything. If you could design a running back on Madden, I think you would design Derrick Henry.
I have to absolutely agree. Derrick Henry is one of the best running backs in the modern era. I wouldn't exactly say he's going to turn out to be the greatest running back of all time, but if he hits another 2,000-yard season, then I might actually have to start considering it. I mean, his competition there is, Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders, LaDainian Tomlinson. I mean, anyone who's watched those guys play would absolutely say, no, of course Derrick Henry isn't the greatest running back of all time. But Derrick Henry right now is by far the greatest running back in the league, and I think he has the potential to turn out to be the greatest running back of all time. I mean, there's no one who can tackle the guy in the entire league. He's too fast, too strong, he stiff arms you, he jukes you. There's nothing Derrick Henry can possibly do wrong. Christian McCaffrey is a great running back. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball. He's a very strong guy as well, and he has a pretty similar skill set to Derrick Henry. But I just think as a pure running back, of course Derrick Henry is going to win the rushing title once again this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for 2,000 yards again this year, even if he's not currently on pace for it.
Yeah, the defenses that are facing the Tennessee Titans are living every defensive worst nightmare. If you've got to face A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry, if you crowd the box too much, Titans are just going to throw it to A.J. Brown or Julio Jones, who can't be stopped one-on-one.
Or they could just run it straight through you regardless.
As soon as you double team either one of them, then you leave your defense exposed to the monster runs of Derrick Henry, who will stiff arm just about any defender on the field into and through the ground if you get close enough to him.
Wow. I think that's all we have time for today. How are we feeling about our 3rd episode, Zachary?
It was a productive episode, and I'm thinking that Derrick Henry is going to go off next week, and I'm ready for the
either that or it's going to turn out to be like every other week where we get proven completely wrong in all of our opinions.
I'm ready for the Washington football team to prove me right, and Taylor Heineke to prove why he's a top 20 quarterback and arguably top 15 quarterback in the league right now. After he's has the best 3-game start to an NFL career that anyone's ever had.
Listen. He's 28 years old. Of course, he's going to have the greatest start. I mean, I know I said I'm not going to slander Taylor Heineke just because he was an XFL player, but like, I have yet to see it. We'll talk about that at the end of the season. That's for sure.
Here's what I say: Taylor Heineke's only had 3 games, and he's had 3 good games. Has yet to have a bad game in the NFL, and
I think we've run out of time to talk about.
Sure, he may be 28 years old, so his NFL career may not last as long, but I think he's proven himself to be a competent NFL starting quarterback so far, and I'm excited to see where he leads the Washington football team.
Well, that's your bonus segment for today, I guess, folks. We'll see you later. It's time to lock up and shut down.